you're starting out with photography, there's so much to learn and so many different things you need to know, and it can be a little bit overwhelming, especially if you don't know exactly what you need to learn. I've been a photographer for almost a decade now, and professionally for about half a decade, and there's a lot of things that I've learned along the way that I wish someone told me when I started out. So today I want to go over 10 things I wish I knew when I was a beginner photographer, hopefully giving you some advice on your journey and making things a little bit easier for you. Number 1, be careful with comparing yourself to other people, especially other people who have a lot more experience and a lot better gear than you. This is something that social media makes especially easy, and something that I did a lot, especially when I was starting out and I was a teenager and very impressionable and very looking towards other people for validation. One thing I found myself doing was looking at photographers on Instagram like Peter McKinnon and thinking, wow, why don't my photos look like that? I wish I could take photos that good. What am I doing wrong? Why am I so bad compared to that? A comparison like this can be really damaging to your progress. Because the truth is, it's not a fair comparison. You're comparing yourself to someone who's been doing it for years and years and has had so much more time to develop their skill. And they're probably also using much higher end equipment, which of course is going to make their photos look higher quality. This one's definitely easier said than done, but try not to compare yourself to others, even not necessarily big people on Instagram, but even just your peers. There's nothing wrong with taking inspiration from other people's work and using it to make your own work better, but when you compare in a negative way, it can only hurt you. Number 2, a better camera will not solve your problems, and you're probably not getting the most out of the camera you have now. Now, this is a kind of blanket statement and is not true for everyone, but if you're looking at your photos and you're thinking, wow, my photos are really bad, I wish they were better, buying a really expensive camera probably isn't going to be the solution. Yes, buying a better camera can improve your photos, but if your fundamental photography skills are not there, then a better camera is not going to make any difference. And then you could be even harder on yourself, because if you do get a really fancy camera and your photos still suck, then you're kind of out of excuses. I would say most beginners, most people starting out in photography are not getting the most out of their camera. The camera is not holding them back. When I first started, I was 13 and I had a Canon Rebel T3. I used this camera for 5 years, and around the year 3 mark, I really started to feel like, I wish I had a better camera. I wish I had a 5D Mark III, which was the top of the line at the time, because my photos would be so much better. And yeah, maybe they would be better, but I'm a big advocate of not spending a ridiculous amount of money on photography gear if you're not going to make that money back from it. I'm in the fortunate position now where this is my full-time job, and if I buy a $3,000 camera body, I'm going to make that money back pretty quickly. But unless you're making a ton of money and have a lot of disposable income for your hobbies, if you're just getting into photography, it really doesn't make sense to spend all this money on gear when you're going to hit that point of diminishing return really quickly and you're going to be spending a lot of money. So practice your skills of composition, nailing your exposure, and really telling a story through your image, which by the way, you can do with any camera. And then once you feel like you've done that to the best of your abilities and you're hitting a wall because of your camera, that's when you upgrade, because then you feel so much more fulfilled in your upgrade because you feel like you've really earned it and you deserve it. Number 3, great lighting with a cheap camera will always look better than bad lighting with a really good camera. The point of this one is to just remember that there are other factors than just your camera and your lens. Shooting in the middle of the day versus shooting at sunset, or shooting indoors with your regular house lights versus shooting indoors with video lights. But what makes something high quality and look really professional often has more to do with the lighting than the amount of megapixels you have. Number 4, shoot a lot. And I mean like a lot. Like if you can go out and shoot every day, you should. Even if it's just a walk around your neighborhood or taking photos of your cat or your sibling, the repetition of it is what's going to make you better. This comes with a caveat though, because you don't want to shoot so much that you get burnt out. This is something that will happen to you at some point no matter what, but you want to try to avoid it as long as possible, especially when you're starting out, and that's burnout. If you shoot every day and you find after a few weeks of doing that, you're getting really exhausted and you're finding it really boring and really tedious, then you either need to switch it up and try something new, or maybe just take a break. Because although shooting a lot is what's going to improve your skills, if you get to the point where you are completely burnt out, recovering from that and taking the time to get back into things and sort of creatively adjust afterwards is going to take a lot longer, and is going to be much more of a toll on your skills than just taking a short break when you start to feel tired. Number 5, don't shoot for social media, shoot for yourself. This is a tricky one and one that I still struggle with, but shooting for yourself and shooting to tell a story you want to tell is more important than shooting something that you think will get the most likes on Instagram. And again, this is something I'm absolutely guilty of. Even just noticing how with Instagram, I tend to shoot most of my photos when I go out in portrait now and not landscape, because I'm thinking about the vertical crop for Instagram. And I hate that because it's really limiting in terms of how you create, because if you're just thinking about what's going to get the most likes, the things that get the most likes on Instagram don't necessarily mean they're the best photos or the best art or the best storytelling. So shoot what makes you happy and what makes you feel artistic and inspired. Don't shoot for likes because it's just going to lead to you being creatively restricted and not enjoying it as much. Number 6, beware of making photography your job. I definitely need to elaborate on this one. If you're a beginner photographer right now, you might be thinking that you love photography and you want to make it your career. And that's totally cool. That's what I did and I love it. It's one of the most amazing jobs I think you could have. However, it's definitely not for everyone. And the problem that happens when you make photography your job is that you lose it as your hobby. That's not to say you can't still shoot for fun or shoot as a hobby on the side when you're working. But what happens, and what I've noticed with me, is that when I'm really busy with client work and doing projects that are maybe a little more boring and a little less creatively inspiring but pay the bills, I have to make those creative sacrifices and do work that doesn't really inspire me necessarily as much or feels a little more tedious. Or the other thing is, if you're a hobbyist and you're shooting for fun, it means you're only shooting when you want to, because when you don't feel like it, you just don't have to. But when you get to the point where you're working and today you really don't feel like editing, but it's due tomorrow for the client, guess what? You need to spend the entire day doing it, even if you don't really feel like it. And that's fine, that's just a part of the process. But the point being, if you love photography because you enjoy it as a hobby and something that relaxes you and something that you can use as an escape, by making it your job, you're going to lose that element to some extent. Because even if you get to the end of your day and you finish all of your editing or shooting or whatever it is for your clients, and then you say to yourself, well, now I'm going to do photography for me. If you can do that, that's great. What I find is that after an entire day or an entire week of working, doing photo editing and video editing and shooting and importing and packing my camera bag, I don't really want to repeat all of that when I'm just doing something for fun. So I end up doing less photography just for fun because it loops back to that kind of burnout. That's not to say you shouldn't be a professional photographer and make money from it, because again, it's an amazing job and I love it. But if you're not ready to make those creative sacrifices and sort of have photography be less of a hobby for you and less of something you can do for fun, then it's not for everyone, because it can actually just ruin photography for some people. Number 7, subtlety is key when editing. One of the biggest mistakes I see beginner photographers making is over editing their photos, cranking that slider further than they need to. And this comes from the inexperience of not paying attention to how subtle changes still affect your image. This is something I did absolutely when I was starting out, cranking the clarity slider, cranking the saturation up too much. It's probably one of the most common mistakes that beginners make, and it's totally fine when you're learning. It's a part of the learning process. Photos that look the least amount of edited are usually the ones that end up looking the best, because you can edit a photo a lot without making it look like it's been edited a lot. The biggest culprits of these are, again, the clarity slider, the contrast, adding grain or a really strong vignette to your image, or cranking the colors into an area where they just look really unnatural. So next time you're editing a photo, try dialing back every slider 50% of what you set it to and see how it looks. Number 8, if you want opportunities, whether that's to shoot things for fun that you want to do or to shoot things for paid work, you have to go out and find them. This is something I see a lot of photographers falling into, and something that I did for myself when I was in school and I was kind of doing this part-time, is people will make an Instagram page or even a website portfolio and just put their stuff on there and expect clients to come to them and then be upset when they don't get the work. The reality is, while it is possible to find clients by just putting your work up on Instagram and not doing anything else, you really do have to go out of your way to contact people and be rejected and put yourself out there in order to get people who actually want to hire you. This is even harder when you're starting out, because when you don't have as good of a portfolio to prove that you can do a good job for a client, it's less likely that they're going to give you that opportunity because you don't have as much proof you can do a good job. So this means you might reach out to 50 people before one of them says yes to hiring you. And it might not be 50 people, it might be 5 people, but if you set the expectation in your head that I'm going to reach out to 50 people and one of them is going to hire me, if you reach out to 50 people and 5 of them hire you, then all of a sudden you're exceeding your own expectations. My point here is just that if you want these opportunities, you have to go look for them, because people are not going to go out of their way to find you, especially if you're a beginner and there are thousands of other more qualified photographers out there. Put yourself out there and don't get discouraged when people say no. Use it as a learning experience on how you can improve and be better for the next pitch. Number 9, a better lens makes a way bigger difference than a better camera. If you're at the point where you're thinking, I have a couple $1,000s to burn and I want to get better camera equipment, think about upgrading your lens before you upgrade your camera body. Now, this isn't just blanket statement advice for everyone, because it completely depends on what camera and lens you currently have and what you're trying to do with them. To this day, I still get lots of people asking, what's the best camera to buy, or what's the thing I should get because I have $500. What should I buy? I can't tell you exactly what to buy because it's completely different depending on your scenario, what your budget is, what you are doing with it, what type of stuff is important to you and what you want to shoot. These are all factors that are going to come into play, and you ultimately have to make that decision. But what I will tell you is that changing a lens for a higher quality lens will almost always make a more noticeable difference than changing your camera body. This is because when you upgrade your camera body, a lot of what you're upgrading for is more megapixels, sometimes faster shutter, and usability features like dual SD cards and more buttons. And those are all good things, but they don't necessarily always translate into a higher quality photo. Whereas the look of your image is almost entirely decided by what lens you use. This is because your lens dictates your maximum aperture, which means if you get like a f1.2 lens, you're gonna have a super blurry background, versus if you have a kit lens that's at like f4, then you're gonna have not as blurry of a background. That's the example most people use, but also just the colors and contrast that you get out of your image are also dictated by the lens you choose. That's why you still see some people using these old vintage lenses that were made 70 years ago, because they don't have autofocus and they're not the crispiest lenses out there, but they have a certain look and feel that they give to the images that people still love. The other thing is that lenses typically last way longer than camera bodies. Camera bodies involve a lot more technology that is regularly updating and upgrading over the years, whereas lenses are usually pretty much the same for 5 to 10 years before they get a massive upgrade, which is why you'll see people shooting on Canon R5s and R6s, these newer mirrorless cameras, and they'll use a Canon EF adapter to put on EF-L lenses from 15 years ago and still get amazing results with them. And number 10, working for free is okay as long as it's on your terms. This is a really highly debated topic in the photography community online, whether or not it's okay to accept work for free. You have one side saying, of course it's okay to accept work for free, you need to build your portfolio somehow, and the other side saying, you should know your worth, you should know how much the company or the person is getting out of you creating those images for them, and you should never work for free because you're always being taken advantage of when you're working for free. And I sit somewhere in the middle where I don't think you should ever work for nothing, but that doesn't mean you can't work for free as in you don't get paid. If you are a beginner photographer, and if you've watched this far into the video, I'm guessing you are, and you want to make money with your photography, you need a portfolio because you need to be able to prove to a stranger that you can do a good job for them. So you prove that to them by showing that you've done a good job for other people in the past. This becomes a problem if you haven't done a good job for people in the past because you're new. So how do you get someone to trust you? You say, well, I'll do the work for free. That way there's absolutely no risk to you if they turn out bad. And maybe don't word it exactly like that, but that's the idea. My point being, you can work for no money, but you're still getting something out of it because you're growing your portfolio and you can use that portfolio to get more work. I also say work for free on your own terms because sometimes people will approach you and ask you to shoot photos for them and have a bunch of terms laid out in terms of what they need delivered and what they want you to do and what the outcome is going to be, but they still want you to do it for free. And this is where it gets a little bit into that territory of being taken advantage of, because if you just go along with someone saying you need to show up for 8 hours and you need to deliver 500 photos and you need to do this kind of editing and retouching, and we're going to follow up with you and ask for revisions, that's not on your own terms. Working for free works best when you're the one reaching out to them asking to do it for free. If they are coming to you, that means they need you more than you need them, in which case you should probably charge them, even if it's a lower amount. The logic of it just doesn't make sense. If they are coming to you, it means they need you to do something for them. Sure, they could find someone else to do it, but if they come to you asking you to do a certain thing for them, especially if they're very specific in what you need to do for them, then it's no longer on your terms, which means you should be charging money for that. So to sum that up, I think it's perfectly okay to work for free as long as you're still getting something out of it. And that's 10 things I wish I knew when I started out in my photography journey. I hope this helped you. Let me know in the comments if you actually learned anything in this video or if maybe you knew all these already. And if you're a more experienced photographer watching this video, let me know your tips in the comments or things that you wish you knew when you started out in photography. We're all here to help each other. If you guys want to check out what gear I recommend for beginners or what gear I use myself, I have links in the description that you can check out for that kind of stuff. I also got my Instagram, TikTok, all that stuff down there as well. If you like this video, hit the like button, subscribe if you want to see more, and I will see you guys in the next one.